In this session, we're going to have a little discussion about printing. And this discussion is really intended for folks that are either using early versions, very early versions of Passport. We're looking at RW 2000 or earlier, or even early versions of the RealWorld Accounting, say version 9.0 and earlier. One of the problems that you tended to run into in those earlier releases of applications were printing issues, especially as the Windows market progressed and more Windows style printers became available to you as a user. You were boxed into using nothing but traditional line feed printers or very specific laser printers. It was very difficult to use and configure things like inkjet printers or even more modern laser printers and so forth. We're going to have a little discussion of how things have changed. Now, I'm not going to give you too much in the line of historical perspective. We have much more detailed, if you will, training style videos on that. What we're going to do is just kind of overview some of those changes here. Now, as we look, we see in our new style Passport menus, we have the CTL, or the control section, system manager, if you will, for the Passport software. And as you would have had in those early releases of Passport or RealWorld, here we are with our company information. Well, we can still set up printers within the company information, but it's become far easier to do, and there's a lot less underlying mapping. Think back to having to do a traditional capture command or a net use command in order to be able to map to a network resource. It's far easier now. All you have to do is set up your traditional printer or one of your more modern printers under your standard Windows devices and printer section. And once it's set up there, and you can print to it from Word or Excel or any other Windows-based program, we're at the point now where we can structure it inside of Passport. And we're going to do so inside of our company information. We're going to click on our printers tab, and you'll see that we list the printers that are currently structured. Now, you're going to notice on my system that I've got no hard mapped printers. You'll see a couple here listed as PDF P and PDF, but these aren't really printers in so much as I'm not expecting to use these as a normal print run to print checks or things along that lines. These are really used more for generating a PDF file. Again, we have separate videos that deal with the PDF printing inside of the application. We'll touch briefly on it here, but really what I want to go over is setting up a new printer inside of Passport. So we're going to click Edit Printers. Now we're going to click New. And you'll notice it gives us our little fields to fill in down below where we can name the printer. So let's call this one our laser. And now it's prompting us for a device name. Back in the application you're using, you might put in an LPT1, LPT2, LPT3, which really kind of limited what you were able to do as far as sending off to multiple printers. Now in this case, it's far easier. Number one, I don't need to understand all the underlying mappings. What I need to know is which Windows printer do I want to send it to. So we're going to use our F7 button, which is going to reach out, and it's actually negotiating with our Windows printers to see what's available to us. And when we click OK, we can drop down a list of any and all of the Windows printers that are established on our local workstation. Now in this case, we're actually going to select this HP OfficeJet. Now this HP OfficeJet is literally an inkjet printer, something that traditionally you wouldn't be able to print to. Do I recommend using inkjet printers in your business? No, not really. They're kind of expensive to run. They seem to be a less expensive printer, but when you take into account all the consumables, they can actually be far more expensive in the long run. So we're going to go ahead now and we're going to select our Accept Selected Printer button, which is going to bring us back to our menu. Now it asks us, how do we want to send to this printer? Well, most of the time when we're structuring this style printer, we're going to use what's called our All Other Printers mode. There's really two options here. Our traditional local LPT parallel port, which literally would only be used generally if we have a truly a parallel line coming off the back of our computer connecting to a printer. This is less and less common these days. Most of the time if we're using a USB style printer, we're just going to use this All Other. In addition, we got to indicate that it is an 80 column printer. What do we mean by that? Well, it's an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. When we do this, we can now drop down our list and select from an array of various printer styles that we do support printing to. And in this case, we're going to use our HP LaserJet, which is pretty typical for the inkjet style printers. Most will accept that output. So at this point, we're literally done. We don't have to get crazy and start adding all kinds of additional character strings and that sort of thing. We're really done at this point. We click Save, and we now have a new printer showing up on our menu. Now, if we're running in the Windows environment, and I clarify this because in Unix or Linux, clearly you're going to want to structure your printers. You're going to want to send to the appropriate print queues on your network. But in this case, I'm running on a Windows workstation. And as such, in an all Windows environment, I have the ability to bypass using our traditional printers. I don't even have to go through the setup process. In most cases, there are very few cases in Passport where we're required to have a hard mapped printer, if you will. So how do I get around that? Well, it's actually kind of simple. So if I were to come into, say, accounts receivable, and we were to go down to our aging report, we're going to go ahead and use our defaults and run this. Notice it gives us a list of different options, right? We have our laser printer listed here. We have that PDF and that PDFP, but we also have some neat things like this Create HTML. We can actually generate an HTML file with this report that is then viewable in any browser. I can send along to somebody. But dealing with the PDF, this is going to allow us to actually generate a PDF version of this report. This is specific to forms, and it will allow us to go ahead and generate a PDF, but it'll also allow us to print the forms at the same time. Think invoices, quotes, purchase orders, that sort of thing. And then there are some other options. We can print a disk still and use our traditional print from disk routines to go back at reports. We can view this in a browser or view it as an HTML. We can view it as a PDF file inside of our browser. And then finally, we can select a Windows printer. So where we have set up our laser printer and could select it from there and off we'd go, we can also opt to select the Windows printer option. Now you'll see many of these don't appear inside of our printer's menu because they don't need to. These exist all the time when we have a Windows environment. And many of these are even available in a Unix and Linux environment. So we're going to select our Windows printer, and here's the difference. It now brings up our traditional Windows dialog box and allows us to drop down from our list and select any printer that is available on our workstation. In other words, it's already been installed and set up. So here we see that HP OfficeJet. We simply select it and click OK, and our report is sending off to our printer. So you see, we've introduced many new options for printing inside of Passport. These new options can make your life far, far easier because it's going to allow you to integrate with some of the printers that you have not been able to with your early versions of Passport or your older versions of RealWorld Accounting. Upgrade to Passport now, and you'll have the ability to start to utilize some of those more modern printers.